Greetings, welcome one and all to the Splintered Image, to this third in a series of art discussions where I talk about medium and technique and inspiration through the lens of some of the pieces of art I have created over the years. I do my own artwork because I was there when it was created, and so I know the medium and the inspiration that went into it, the techniques, whatever. I do sometimes reference other artists, well-known artists, in the context of the medium I'm using or the style I'm doing, as in my last video discussing Jackson Pollock. This will be more about technique this time and inspiration. So this is kind of going to be a hard painting to light. I've already tried it multiple times, and I'm not sure this video may be a little bit on the poor side. Just know it's because it's a very large canvas and it's a dark subject matter, and it's very hard to light this thing and get it, to look very good without being either too dark or washed out. And I'm not sure what the dimensions on this canvas are, but I'll figure that out and put those on the bottom of the screen. I did it in the late 1990s. It's a self-stretched canvas, which is a lot of fun to do, and I'll get into that one of these days with a separate video on how to stretch a canvas. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the inspiration and the subject matter, and then the second half go into medium and inspiration, and also specifically I want to cover scaling up from a thumbnail or mock-up drawing into a larger piece of artwork, and I'll do that toward the end. So this is a painting called Somewhere in Freakout from the late 1990s. Out in the South Wisconsin countryside, there are these two old stone silos or brick silos. They were out there in the 1980s. Who knows if they're still there now? And they were just all alone out in the middle of the wilderness. And my brother and I and a couple of friends went out one night, and being the miscreants that we are, we snuck onto this farmer's land past the no trespassing sign. And these two silos were just out in the middle of the countryside on a moonlit night. You could see them from a distance. It was very spooky. And we went out to these two things. They have no tops on them. Also, I have a new pointer that I'll be using. I just be kind of generalizing things. I'm not going to jump in front of the camera. I'll leave the canvas be the main event. But there are no roofs on these silos, or there were no roofs on these silos or domes. So you could literally go inside them and peer up and look at the starlit sky above. It was really, really creepy when we went out there and did that. Well, so we called this area Freakout because it was pretty freaky and it was out there. And I wrote a poem about it in the 1990s called Somewhere in Freakout, which was also tied to this painting. The image of the two silos has also come up in another drawing of mine that's on the blog page of my website. And it's the same thing. It's just called Freakout, or it was done for the poem Somewhere in Freakout, actually. So the painting was done obviously because this landscape left a massive impact on my imagination and my psyche. It was very, very, even though I was only out there, I think, one time, it was still made quite an impression. So this painting is done in two different styles. The background areas, the road in the back, the hills, the trees, they're all done in an expressionist style. Not quite pointillism, which was Seurat's thing, but he used color theory and lots of little dots of color to create the images that you would see from afar. When you were up close, you would just see a bunch of dots of color. But if you look at the trees and the bushes and stuff in this, you can just see it's all very expressive brush strokes. There's not a lot of high detail in that. But then the intention was to do the silos more rigid and more straightforward. So they've got hard edges. They're a lot more clear. They would have had a lot more detail in them. I never quite finished what I wanted to do with the canvas, especially on the silos. And I keep saying to go back there and do more to it one day. But with all the stuff I'm trying to do, maybe not for a while. But also the moon, which is done very carefully so that the Maria, the dark and the light spots on it, pretty much match the actual moon. I'm pretty sure I got accurate, even to the point where there's the Tycho crater at the bottom of the moon. And so the two styles kind of juxtapose. The silos stand out in the harsher style because they stood out against that landscape. They were this man-made thing, just this relic that stood out there in the middle of this very, beautiful rolling landscape. So I wanted to do that. I also wanted to have it to be where the moon lights the canvas. So in an ideal situation, it would be displayed in a darkened room so that the light almost seems to come from inside the canvas. That's why you've got the moon glow on all the bushes and the trees, and even on the silos there's some moon glow where the moon's lighting up the landscape. And even in the hills in the bottom, the moon is kind of lighting up the whole landscape. So ideally this would be seen in the right lighting conditions. It would look a lot better. It is done with acrylic paint, which it has a gloss to it. So the varnish in the acrylic paint reflects light, so it gives it a glow, which also makes it very difficult to light because all the light just bounces back off it. So the other thing I wanted to discuss was scaling up. There's a couple of techniques for doing that. So in other words, if you get an idea, you jot it down, like make a little thumbnail sketch, then you're going to want to have that go up, blow up into a large painting. And if you want to keep that same dimensions and the same layout that you did on the smaller version, there are ways that you could transfer that image up. One is called block transfer. So basically what you would do is make a bunch of vertical and horizontal lines. So I'm going to put an image in the screen here. This is going to be my mock-up drawing for this painting. And that was the second stage. So with most of the work I do, like cover art and stuff like that, I will start with a thumbnail on a piece of scratch paper, on the back of a piece of writing, even on a napkin sometimes, which seems to be a very common thing with creative people, writing things on napkins, or inventors or whatever in popular culture. But you do the thumbnail and you do the sketch of what you want it to be, how you want it to be laid out. Then I do the mock-up drawing, and the mock-up drawing takes that idea and then it fleshes it out, and it gets the composition and puts everything where I want it to be. Like if I want these to be in the right-hand third of the image, I'm going to kind of set all that up and figure it out and basically do what could be on its own a final drawing. Now, to transfer that up, this doesn't scale perfectly because the canvas is not the same scaling as the drawing. The drawing has more horizontal width to it, and I'm not sure why I changed that when I scaled it up. But if it was a direct scale up, you could just measure or multiply the dimensions and the measurements toward a common number. Say you want to multiply everything by 2 or 10, every dimension, and then you can directly scale it up, and it's a lot easier to use this technique. But you put your vertical and horizontal lines on there, you make a grid work basically of blocks, and then you just take the block on the drawing and transfer that to the block on the canvas. So you're basically just drawing what's in that square, and by doing that you orientate all your lines and all your designs inside the painting. Then you can kind of go over that and tighten it up. What I kind of like to use myself is locating points of reference. So if I know the exact dimensions I'm scaling up from the smaller version, like if I have to multiply everything by 2, if it's a scaling up twice, then I can measure from the side of the drawing to the silo. I can measure from the side of the drawing to the silo and find the correct position scaling it up for that silo. I can find the moon. I can go over the horizontal axis and the vertical axis, draw 2 lines like a crosshairs to locate exactly where I want the moon to be. Now in this drawing, the moon is placed a little bit differently. So I kind of changed my mind when I got into the larger scale. Now what that means is that I'm not actually transferring the specific elements of the image. I'm just laying out the position of the basic object. So this tree here, this silo here, and then I'm going back in and I'm filling it in with a kind of a freehand or a sketch. I'm going in there and fleshing out the drawing, which is how I like to do it sometimes. The block transfer works very good. You can also use a projector, an overhead projector, and you can project your drawing onto the canvas that way. Some people may call it cheating, but as far as I'm concerned, if it's your own drawing, however, you can get onto the canvas, because the main thing is the painting. And if you want to do a very structured painting, then that's how you would do it. Now you could also do a very loose painting, freehand painting, expressionist painting, where you don't actually start with a drawing, or you just start with some basic sketches on there to get where you're going. There's all different kinds of ways you can do it. But as far as transferring, if you want the drawing that you're doing to transfer onto the large canvas because you like how that looks and you like that layout, then block transfer is a good way of doing that. So anyway, this has been Somewhere in Freakouts. I will be back at some point with another one of these. Who knows when? Everything's happening very quickly. But I hope you enjoyed it and have a great day.